Seltzer Kings
podcasts.
When you check out at the pharmacy, you see the journey from idea to medicine, thanks to our intellectual property system, or IP for short. IP safeguards inventions, like a new way to prevent seizures or lower cholesterol. And IP supports competition from other brands, then lower cost generics, which are 90% of prescriptions filled in the US. Innovation, competition, lower costs, thanks to IP. Learn more at phrma.org/IP works wonders.
Real people making bold moves. Unforgettable journeys into life's next chapter. This is the Second Act Podcast.
Every day is a new chance. Mindset on a new path. Anything is possible. Any limit I surpass. Everything is in my grasp. I got tunnel vision with a pickaxe. Life is more fun when you live like there's no strings attached.
Welcome back to the Second Act. How you doing, John?
I'm doing great. I am excited about this episode today because of a lot of reasons, but before we started recording, as we dug into Australia and the nuances that I've experienced, it's just a great place and a product of so many great things. And I think our guest is going to be no different, but I'm doing well. Got the first snow on the ground out here in Colorado Springs. So that changes things a little bit. You got to start watching out for the drivers all around and add in those little extra minutes of time getting everywhere. But how about yourself? How was your weekend?
Fantastic. I always get to meet so many interesting people nowadays that I normally wouldn't cross paths with, and everyone's got a story to tell. Some people have a little bit more trouble than others telling their own story, which I find fascinating. We tell ourselves a lot of stories, but when it comes to telling others our story, it becomes a little more difficult. So that's been interesting to learn. But I don't think our guest today is going to have any trouble there. I'm excited to introduce her. Emma Doyle is joining us on the show today. Emma is known as Coach M. She's a highly skilled energy coach with a mission to help others unlock their potential and achieve exceptional results. Transitioning from her role as an international high-performance tennis coach to corporate coaching, Emma brings a unique perspective, guiding managers and teams to harness their energy, spark curiosity, and perform at their best under pressure. As a former D1 college tennis player and world team coach for Australia on 20 different occasions, Emma's elite sports background deeply enriches her coaching approach. Certified by the International Coach Federation and trained in neuro-linguistic programming and emotional intelligence,
That's a big word.
Emma offers clients a holistic experience that addresses both personal and professional growth. She's a sought-after keynote speaker, Amazon bestselling author of What Makes You a Great Coach, and host of her own podcast called The Coaching Podcast, where she interviews top experts from the worlds of sports and business to share invaluable insights on coaching and leadership. She also has a TEDx talk called Unleashing Female Potential, where she shares her core belief in the power of curiosity over judgment, inspiring her audiences to think differently. When she's not doing all this, Emma pursues her passions for golf, wine tasting, tennis, of course, pickleball, and splitting her time between Denver, Colorado, and Melbourne, Australia. Welcome to the show, Emma.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. It's always, as you said, listening to the bio, you get a bit embarrassed and then you go, nah, just own it. Why not?
Yeah.
There you go. You got to own it. Absolutely.
Do you have any time between all that stuff to actually golf and wine taste and
Oh, yeah. You know
play
what we
tennis?
say? We go out and we play golf, and if we play well, we visit a winery, and if we play bad, we visit a winery. So it's a bit of a
Love it.
perfect scenario. Absolutely. No, Australia's got some beautiful wineries, beautiful golf courses, and to really have this situation living between the best of both worlds. You're both in Colorado,
Yeah.
and I never thought I'd live here. I thought it snowed all the time. And of course, that's the biggest kept secret until I mentioned it on your amazing
Yes.
podcast. And yeah, that's really how much, I love the best of both worlds. So very fortunate.
Emma, we like to get into our shows and we do it fairly abruptly, but we start by saying, hey, tell us who you are. Tell us how you got your start and what made you who you are today that our audience gets to experience. What what details can you provide that are significant, as you were growing up in your childhood moments?
Thanks for asking that. And reflecting on that question, it takes me back to a time when my parents moved out to Australia. Mum said she'd move anywhere but Australia, the only place Dad could get a job. So off on the boat they went, literally. And then when we got there, when I was my two sisters were born, and then when I came along, we moved back to Cambridge. So I sort of lived back in Cambridge, and then we came back to Australia, and then I lived in Manchester. So it was a little bit of back and forward. And I wonder whether that environment shaped my ability to make friends quickly. You have to be able
Sure.
to talk to people. You have to be able to build friendships. My grade 4 Manchester buddy, she's now living in New Zealand. She married a Kiwi, and we catch up as much as I can nip over across the pond. Love New Zealand as well. So, I think that's one of the first things that I think shaped my ability to really understand people, even when I was a kid. How do you build rapport with people, which is, something that I teach now. Everyone can learn it. I think my
Yeah.
environment maybe forced that upon me. And so that's one thing. And then the next thing that I'd share is, after I've been very entrepreneurial all my life, and after my paper round, which wasn't a great return on an investment, as in $7 a round, not an hour, I decided to become a tennis coach at 14 to get an extra private lesson a week, because the kick serve had just come out, and I wanted to learn this serve. And so my coach said, if you coach one day a week, then you can have an extra private lesson, which of course my parents really couldn't afford with, 4 young kids. And so I started tennis coaching when I was 14. And I'll never forget the day that I walked off the court, and I was like, this is the greatest job in the world. I get to wear a tracksuit. I get to be a kid myself. I get to engage with children. And I had no idea, of course, what I was doing. I just copied the coach on the court next to me. And I really felt like, wow, this is something that it's special. Some people become sports coaches because, they didn't maybe make it as a tennis player, so they become a coach. Whereas I had a bit of a different lens cap, in that I wasn't a great, amazing player when I was in the under 12s. I hardly sort of represented my state, let alone my region. So I was like, oh, coaching, this is something really interesting. So that would be the second point. And probably the third pivotal point in the opening story, when I reflect back, is the day I'm 18 years of age. And I'm sitting in the course of my dreams, because, sports coaching and administration. And in walks one of the most famous Australian football coaches. And he was still coaching at the time. And he was the coach of my favorite team since I was 5, Carlton
Oh,
Football Club.
wow.
David Parkin, Parko, shout out to Parko. And he walks in, and his veins popping out of his neck, and he's so passionate. And he's like, coaching, it's all about passion. You need plenty of it if you're going to survive in this world. And I was like, just like in heaven. I was like, this is exactly where I'm meant to be. Anyway, fast forward 6 months into my degree, and he pulls me into his office. And let's just say that I got pulled into the principal's office in high school a couple of times, because I'd say formal education wasn't the way I learned best. That's a nice reframe on that one for any kids out
Yeah,
there listening
nice.
as well. And so I'm in his office, I'm thinking, oh God, like, what have I done? And he said to me again, he goes, do you want to be the best coach you can be? And I was like, yes, like, what have I got to do? And he asked me a question that was one of those first pivotal, really big shifts in my life. And he said to me, have you maximized your playing potential as a tennis player? Have you become the best tennis player that you can be? And I was like, absolutely not. I was in the best shape of my life. I was now playing state grade tennis. Didn't really have that many contact hours. And I said, there's this thing in America called college tennis. And I really know nothing about it, except I know a couple of Aussies that went, and showing my age here, but put my VHS video in the mail, sent it to like 10 universities that I knew other Aussies had gone. And I said, whoever writes back or rings me, that's where I'm going to go. And so this guy rings up, and he goes, we're here in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. We have a little crime rate. And I was like, Mum, what's a crime rate? I had no idea what he was talking about. And I said, I don't care. I'm coming. And that was a really pivotal moment for him to ask me, am I maximizing my potential as a player first if I want to become a great coach? And that to me is even a reflection question. I think with podcasts, it's important. Maybe just listeners right now pause and just say, are you maximizing your potential? And what could you do to maximize your potential? What things could you put in place right here, right now, today to say, how could I squeeze more out of my life and my purpose? And I'm very grateful for that because I put myself under pressure as a college player because every girl was just as good as me. It's like, who's going to win is who's more mentally tough, fit, grit, resilient. And
Sure.
it taught me that. And that's what I took then when I was, representing my country so many times, sitting on the side there, understanding what those players are going through was a really important part of my early career that I wanted to share those early stories. So, gentlemen, back at you. Are you maximizing your potential?
We're trying, but I love the question because it's more about being the best version of yourself and not trying to be someone else. And I think that's a very important distinction. As kids, we idolize certain people, celebrities, actors, sports figures, and we want to be like that person. But I know oftentimes in my own family, I encourage my son to be the best version of himself. Like, have you put in your best effort to do your best work? And
Yep.
if you can honestly tell me, yes, that's all I expect from you. You don't need to be the next this, that, or the other. And I love that question, Coach M, from your childhood. But I also loved when you pursued your first coaching career or coaching gig, and you look to your left and your right to try to figure out how to do it out of the gate. And I think that's what we all do when we're starting something new and we're trying to make a go at it.
Yep.
We don't know what the hell we're doing. We just trying to look to our neighbors, do a little assessment and get going and figure it out along the way.
Totally. Couldn't agree more.
And Emma, this is what I love about athletes who turn into coaches, because for your whole career, you're taking in advice. And it's similar to the military and flying, I think, because we're taking in all this input to make ourselves better. But we're also some of our own worst critics because we do it so often and we're around so many other professionals that we know our strengths and our weaknesses intimately. And we're able to digest those hard critiques. But then as you shift, at 14, you're sitting there now starting to coach. But now I would say in your professional career, you've been able to take those experiences of critique and, digesting and being able to really break apart the problem and figure out what's the best way forward. And I've seen that in players, and I've seen that in or athletes, and I've seen that in military service members. And you're just showing me that again, that, some of the best people out there have just been around that world of just self-diagnosis and improvement. And so it's amazing to me that you started at 14 where you were coaching. So I imagine people walked in for a lesson and shook their heads thinking, what am I going to learn from this person? But there you are teaching.
Yeah, well, if I could share another pivotal moment, because in preparation for this interview, I was really looking at what were my turning points. Or Sliding Doors, big fan of that movie. Sliding Doors, Gwyneth Paltrow. Anyway, check it out if you haven't seen it. It's an oldie but a goodie where she misses the train and she gets the train. Anyway, I was at a stage in my career where I would say to myself, why do I bring out the best in these four players? And those four players that don't quite, why can't I
Sure.
just tap into those players? And I wanted to pick up on something you just said then, John, around my biggest aha moment. And so that was, I thought I was burnt out as a coach, right? Because I was like, I'm going to have a career change because this is just not really working. And plus I was traveling a lot on the other side of the world with mainly teenage girls, and also the parents. I didn't know how to communicate with the parents. So I went and studied workplace and business coaching. And I met Natalie Ashdown, the CEO of Open Door Coaching, and she helped me redefine what coaching really means. And that is unlocking a person's potential to maximize their own performance. So when I heard that and learned that and understood that the power is in them, you just said, break apart the problem and let them figure it out. Self-diagnosis, a couple of the key words in what you just said there. And with our backgrounds as a technical expert, right?
Yep.
I was an advice giver. I'm like, let's talk the technique on the serve. I can go all day with anyone on about the biomechanics. Same in the military, in the Air Force, there are certain things that you need to know. You have to a direct piece of advice. The CEO made me coach on the tennis court and off the tennis court, and I wasn't allowed to give one piece of advice. I wasn't allowed to give one directive command. Now that changed my map of the world almost overnight, because I just realized those 4 players that I didn't know how to bring out the
Sure.
best in them. Oh, they learn differently. Oh, there's these learning preferences. Oh, there's these behavioral styles. Oh, I realized that if I could adapt, not saying change my authentic self, but if I could adapt my communication and do it in a way that is how they are going to respond best,
Yep.
and I learned how to ask curious questions, it was a total game changer for me. And this is back in the early 2000s. So that was my next pivotal point, because it kind of catapulted me back into coaching coaches how to coach. Because in that chapter 1, yes, I looked good. I was extrovert and loud and had high energy. I've always had high energy, right? So people would gravitate towards that. But really, I had verbal diarrhea, if you don't mind me. That was the truth, right? That was the truth. It was just information
Yeah.
overload, okay? And now when I coach, it's the power of the pause. It's when I do say or ask a pivotal question, it has a purpose, and it's helping them self-diagnose, unlock the potential to maximize their own performance. And that was another massive pivotal moment in my life, that's led me to who I am today, my vocation, the way I show up, everything from catching an Uber. And I'm one of those people, yep, when I get out of the Uber, I pretty much know most things about that person. I came home Saturday night from North Carolina, and the guy's like, no one's ever asked me that before. Gee, that's a really great question. I've never asked my parents why they moved from West Africa to North Carolina. I don't know the answer why my parents moved to North Carolina. It was, I'm not reinventing the wheel by any stretch of the imagination. It's just a great way to practice your curious questions for anyone who's interested in exploring this way of coaching.
Absolutely. I mean, the power of curiosity. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, and when you think about the questions that you ask, how you ask them, it leads to a lot more interesting conversations and sort of key learnings from each other, rather than just sort of spitting out a bunch of stuff all the time and not giving the other side. It's not just personalities, but just the way people process information. I know myself, as I process information as sort of an introverted person, which is ironic since I'm doing a podcast with John. But the way that I process information is different, and so the communication and how we interact with another is unique to each of us.
And, as you're talking, Emma, I really appreciate you having to go back and analyze how you started coaching and the way you went about it. Because one of those breakthrough moments for me was when somebody encouraged me to instruct another pilot on how to fly, how to hover, how to do these things within the aircraft without taking the controls. Because I would give the controls up and say, okay, now you do this. And as soon as they started to slip or make the slightest wrong input, I would immediately take the controls and say, no, do it like this. Well, somebody saw that and said, hey, next time, I know it's time critical, but you need to use your words to correct them instead of taking the controls completely from them and doing it yourself. And again, eye-opening instruction, and it changed the way I spoke. And in time critical moments, it made me realize that words mean things, and you have to be very succinct in what you say in those moments to make sure the right response is adhered to. And so it's amazing. Again, I'm going back to athletes who become coaches, and you shift the way you instruct, but it's natural because you've been around instruction for so long. So that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I think it's interesting from a feedback perspective as well. So many times these days, if the boss says they want to see you in their office, everyone goes, "Uh-oh." Or, we have this feeling in our stomach
Yeah.
that, what have I done wrong? I think uh, that's one thing that everyone can maybe learn from the athletic world is that we are used to continuous feedback. Whether, again, I had a drama teacher on my podcast. On the stage, there's continuous feedback. Same in your backgrounds, there's continuous feedback. It's the way that you deliver the feedback that is hypercritical. And one thing that may be a practical tool that your listeners may reflect on is the power of a why question. So if something's gone wrong and you're debriefing and you say, "Why did you do that?" People will give you a long list of blame others, justify their behavior, be quite negative, and add more problems to the situation, all because you just said, "Why did you do that?" If instead it's important to say, okay, you could ask a reality question around what happened, and then move very quickly, if you can, into future-based questions. What would you do differently next time? How could you come at this problem from a different angle? Or how could you come at this opportunity through a new lens? How would you adjust what you did do? So, we call that in coaching just playing above the line versus below the line. And it's a very practical tool. And we as leaders, we as coaches, as managers, have to be obsessed with the why. Why do we get out of bed? What's our purpose? Why are we doing what we're doing? So we're obsessed with the why, but be mindful of it as it relates to giving feedback, direct feedback, whether you're coaching up or coaching team members. So what do you think of that one, Michael? Practical, useful?
Very useful in the way that I've approached the why when something has happened. Usually I don't have the full context or set of circumstances. And I often like to ask, help me understand, like just help me understand what occurred, what were the steps that happened from their perspective. And then, again, the way that I process information and think about things, I try to go into it objectively as possible with that question, just so that I don't prejudge what may have happened and then how I would help maybe craft a better way forward for the next time.
Love it. Love it. And next time, that was the two key words in my TEDx talk. So the minute you put next time in the front of a sentence, it automatically puts people in a future-based state, which I love.
I need to learn how to talk to my kids better and ask them, questions after school. Because they get in the car and I start, "Hey, how was your day at school?" And, it's fine. I give them an outlet for those one-word answers. And I think I need to probably work on this questioning a little bit better. I'm learning, Emma. Thank you.
John, give this one a go. Just add "tell me" in front of that. So tell me about which of your professors knocked it out of the park today. Tell me about what you learn today that you didn't know yesterday. Tell me about your day. Even that is a story invitation versus a closed question. So questions are the answer. I love that one.
Yeah,
That's what I
that's great.
passionately believe.
And John, you talked earlier about what words matter, and it's funny. I was standing waiting to pick up my son one day, and somebody else was picking up another child. We were just chit-chatting for a second, and I was telling her it was difficult to get information about the day out of my son when after school. And there's a couple of things that I learned. One, they may be just exhausted and don't want to talk about anything for like half an hour. They just want to that's their decompression time, of the ride home. But two, it's the phrasing of the question like we've been talking about. Instead of saying like, "What'd you do today?" or "What happened today?" or "Tell me more," it could also be like, "What excited you today?" or "What did you find really interesting today?" And they're maybe more inclined, at least at a child level, to talk about those things than sort of like I spent time studying history or studying mathematics or whatever. And it may be an answer about recess or something with some of their buddies, but at least you're starting to get some
Yep.
information out of them.
Yeah.
In the sporting context, they used to call the car ride home the prison cell, of course, because parents got the opportunity to allow the child couldn't go anywhere. So, and they'd say, "How do you think you played?" And the minute the child would answer, one thing, the parent is off and running. So Ash Barty was one of Australia's best tennis players. I got a chance to interview her dad, and he said that he would never bring up about the match in the car unless she brought it up first. So again,
Okay.
like you said, just giving her time, and then also then asking at least 5 curious questions first before jumping in and offering opinions and statements.
Amazing. Did you know at age 14 that you immediately wanted to spend at least a good portion of your career coaching, or was it something that a passion that evolved more over the years before you pivoted into some of the stuff you're doing now?
I knew I wanted to be a coach. I walked off that court and I was like, I want
Okay.
to be a coach. And I know not everybody has that. And I've had different versions of, I keep reinventing myself as a coach, which I'm sure we'll talk about later in the show. But I share that to just acknowledge that a lot of people I know don't know, have an early epiphany about what it is they want to do. But I knew there was magic in seeing what others can do and helping others. That's empathy is one of my superpowers. So I've had that very naturally. I do believe you can learn that as well, and that it is something that I knew from really early on. So I'm very fortunate from that perspective.
This episode is brought to you by Amazon Prime. There's nothing sweeter than baking cookies during the holidays. With Prime, I get all my ingredients delivered right to my door, fast and free, no last-minute store trips needed. And of course, I blast my favorite holiday playlist on Amazon Music. It's the ultimate soundtrack for creating unforgettable memories. From streaming to shopping, it's on Prime. Visit Amazon.com/Prime to get more out of whatever you're into.
Hey, it's Austin James. Yes, I'm living with diabetes, but it doesn't have to define me. Thanks to the Freestyle Libre 3 Plus sensor, I get real-time glucose readings throughout the day. The Freestyle Libre 3 Plus sensor is small and easy to wear, giving me the freedom to focus on my life as a parent and a musician. Now this is progress. You can get a free sensor at freestylelibre.us.
Offer available for people who qualify. Visit myfreestyle.us to see all terms and conditions. Certain exclusions apply. Data on file, Abbott Diabetes Care. For prescription only. Safety info found at freestylelibre.us.
So you had the passion for coaching, you put that to work in tennis, and then there was a pivotal moment where you transitioned out of tennis into professional coaching, essentially, business professional coaching. So what was that moment, and how did that start to take off in interesting ways?
Yeah. So, and I just add in there, one of the reasons that I came to America it was around 2012, was to become a speaker. So speaking was a huge part of then one of my transitions. So it was still coaching, but it was like, how can I impact one to many? How can I get on stages? And I started out speaking in tennis. I say it's my Catholic parents' proudest moment when I followed the Pope in Rome for one of my keynotes in front of 5,000 coaches. My parents were like, "Can we come and watch you speak?" I'm like, "You've never watched me speak before. You just want to meet the Pope." True story. So speaking, and then I was speaking in sport, and then I was transitioning into speaking in corporate. And then, of course, I had that beautiful 1 week in 2020. It was February 2nd to 7th, right? It was 5 days. And it was Monday, cancelled. Tuesday, next speaking gig, cancelled. Wednesday, 3 more cancelled. Thursday, 6 and by Friday, my entire diary for 2020, and I was speaking all over the world, was gone. And that was hard because I was starting to really make some traction with my speaking. And a lot of these conferences, they weren't going virtual then. They were just, everything was just canceling. So that was huge for me in relation to how do I transition? What next? And that's where I drew upon finishing my book, What Makes a Great Coach. And I'd started my podcast back at the end of 2016. But essentially, I had all this amazing data from interviewing, like you said, having great conversations with amazing people. So I had all this data on, in 1 to a maximum of 3 words, what makes a great coach. And writing has always been a challenge my entire life, reading and writing. And so I was collecting this data, but I wasn't getting anywhere. And I'm like, oh my goodness. And then Natalie Ashdown from Open Door Coaching, like a good coach does, she's like, how's that book of yours going? And I'm like, it's not. And she's like, come on, we'll finish it. And then she also
Oh, nice.
overnight also offered me the ability to run open door coaching courses so people can become qualified coaches here in the US. So I had that opportunity. I started going to all sorts of networking events here in Colorado and expanding the people that I knew here, and met some incredible people in manufacturing, construction. And I thought, how can I create coaching cultures in the workplace? How can I take my years of high performance sport? I dabbled in executive coaching, since I'd done the course, but I never really looked at how do I take these concepts and really expand them into the workplace, because I know they work. I'm like, I can see the benefits of empowering others and asking great questions and bringing out the best in others. So that is one of the major tipping points with COVID. So it was a little bit forced.
There's a forcing mechanism. Yeah, yeah,
There's a
yeah.
there's a forcing mechanism, and there's also, I think if I could share anything on a podcast called The Second Act, it would be the power of the universe. I do believe in looking for signs and putting yourself out there. It could be very easy for me of just to not shared what happened, but being vulnerable and saying, all right, how am I going to pivot and how am I going to shift myself really commit into the world of creating coaching cultures in the workplace. And so that was a pivotal time. But I want to share with your audience too that I think when people make major changes like into that second act, sometimes again things were forced on them, like they've hit rock bottom, and maybe health reasons, and they've had to make a pivot. So while COVID did that 1 week, my keynote speaking disappeared. I want to share the fact that being open to signs, being open to sharing your story invites others to engage and point you in the right direction. When you're open to reading signs, looking for the cues. I don't want that to sound like kumbaya and we're all hugging trees, right? Because that's not what I'm at all. Did that make sense?
It makes 100% sense, and I 100% agree with you that if you're open to what the universe is willing to use a tennis metaphor, serve up your way, some really fun and interesting and cool things can happen. I mean, you were faced with some pretty significant adversity having your business dry up because of COVID. Nobody wanted to meet in person. Nobody even wanted to go to the grocery store without like a hazmat suit on. And that changed many businesses in a lot of different ways. But I love that you had an accountability partner in your process who said, hey, where are you at in this book? Because at some point you told this person you're going to write a book, and this was an opportunity for them to remind you of that. And now might be a good time because you can't go speak to people. And in focusing on that instead of the area where you just couldn't focus because of the circumstances, it probably created doors that you didn't even know existed in your journey in really interesting ways, and has led you to sort of all the amazing things that are happening now.
Totally. So thank you for that. And in my book, the research of over 500 of the world's leading coaches, and the first person I asked was Roger Federer, so arguably the GOAT of tennis.
The GOAT. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So he said someone who listens. And I was like, whoa, there's something in this, because I just wasn't expecting that answer. I don't know what I was expecting, but when I heard that, I had all this amazing data and I put it into the top 10 practices. So things like empathy, passion, resilience, curiosity, decision-making, listening, just to name a few, are in the top 10 practices. And you know what the most ironical thing right now is? That is what I do for companies. So when I do a needs analysis, they say, okay, we're having trouble communicate. Well, practice 9 in the book is communication. So I take all the tools from that and go in and help create those coaching cultures in the workplace. So it's not rocket science sometimes. Like these practices, it's not like you've never heard of those before, but it's how do you do it through a coaching lens cap? It's not just here's how you communicate better. It's how do you communicate in a way that brings out the best in others. And so I'm very grateful, as you said, for that opportunity, for that pivot, yet another sliding doors moment in my life, because with the second act and listening to some of, your amazing previous guests, I pinch myself because, as I said at the start, I feel like I'm just an ordinary person living an extraordinary life. And I've had lots of sliding door moments, uh, but nothing, that's really been like, I have to make the change. So I want to implore people listening to explore and discover what's really going on for you. And is it time to be more open to a pivot or a sliding door opportunity?
And like you said, sometimes the pivots are forced on us, and other times they're by choice.
Yeah.
But rather than sort of reacting against it, be more curious about where it may lead
Yeah.
you. Because good things lead to bad and bad things lead to good, and you just never know where things will take you. So I love that it gave you that opportunity. I'm going to write that book and talk to such incredible people through that process, and lead you to your TED Talk and all the other amazing endeavors that you've been involved in. It's just a powerful reminder that anything is possible, really.
As cliche as that may sound, it is how I live my life. And the other point that is really important to me is that talent is not nearly as important as execution. So what I've learned in my life is, and let me actually just share that when I represented my country, I only ever met 3 girls where I said, "You have to step up and win for Australia today. Yeah, I need you to win this match and focus on the outcome, purely on the outcome." That's 3 girls, like, that's kind of one every 8 years, seriously. So, one thing that fascinates me around that is when we focus on the process, when we focus on our performance goals, things that are within our control, and we take one step in the direction, taking action in one step towards where you wanna go, that is more important than the most talented people in the world. And letting go of the outcome, yes, you need to set an outcome goal, you have to know where you wanna go, you have to have a vision, okay? And if you don't, just keep unpicking the layers of the onion until you have roughly, because taking direction in any direction is more powerful than doing nothing.
Absolutely.
It's great.
And have an emphasis on energy when it comes to your coaching. And there's a famous phrase, where the focus goes, the energy flows. So talk to us a little bit about where energy comes into all of this. And you are a high energy person. We've talked to someone previously in the podcast who talked about monitoring or watching your energy levels throughout the day, which I found fascinating to do, like an energy audit in your day to see like when you're at your best and when you're at your worst, depending on what it is that you're doing. But it's just this very interesting thing to me that I hadn't really thought about until that person brought it up, and now it being sort of a cornerstone of some of the work that you do. So I'd love to hear more about that as well.
One of our gifts in life is to accumulate as much energy as we can and give back as much energy as we can. So I'm a passionate believer in that. The more energy we can accumulate, the more we can give out and give back for not wanting anything in return. In my book, again, they're not called chapters, they're called practices, right? So practice 5 in the middle of the book is energy. Okay, enhancing energy sits in the middle for a reason as well. Okay, balancing that energy, because I'm a Libran and I don't believe in balance. I don't think it exists. And I also come from the world of high performance sports. So everything's periodized. So sometimes, like last week, I worked my butt off, right? Boom. Okay. And now, I mean, like there's the dip there for recovery. So it is important that we manage our energy. And in that practice, I talk about how do you top your energy up? What are your energy traps? And then how do you manage your energy? Almost think about like a periodized plan. Like when is your busiest period? When's your busiest season? And then how do you then recover? And so this is a really important self-awareness. And I love that your previous guest, just a check-in scaling question on a scale of 1 to 10. Where's your emotional energy at? Where's your physical energy at? And just doing a little scaling question there to check in where you're at. If you're a 4, don't go for a 10. Just like, what do I need to do to raise my game to a 5 without necessarily drinking a Red Bull, right? So what are some of the energy hacks, energy tricks Even I teach one, just if you've got a headache, how to just release headache tension just by retracting your neck off your spine, right? That can relieve the base of the headache. So there are so many little things that you can do. And I was speaking to a manager last week, and she's like, I don't know how to get the energy in this hybrid world. I've got this team on Zoom, and boom, I gave her like 10 ideas of how you hack your energy. We're throwing the ball to each other. We've got one of my Ted Lasso, you Ted Lasso fans. I've got my Believe rock here, and I've got quotes from Ted Lasso. Ice cream is the best. It's kind of like seeing Billy Joel perform live. Never disappoints. I've got my fortune cookie here, right, with all the wisdom quotes. We'll finish with one of those for our episode. We've got symbols that people can bring in and tell the team what they're going to bring to the culture exercise. We've got our pattern break questions, wheelofnames.com. I use that all the time. Put everyone's name in a wheel and spin the wheel. And there's so many things you can do to hack the energy and get people standing, sitting, moving. In my corporate workshop, I use water balloons to teach empathy, absorbing the water balloon, understanding people's maps of the world. So I'm big on learn through play concepts, which gets people up, down. Next thing you know, they're like, oh, I didn't even realize we've just been learning about resiliency, communication, and integrity for the whole day, and the day's over. So I'm a huge believer in this. And I'm actually tomorrow, I'm going to the Brighton Youth Summit to teach kids how to coach themselves. And I'm doing that with beanbags,
Nice.
fishing net rackets. That's one of my give back to teenagers. I still have that soft spot in my heart to empower kids. Went to Africa last month working with under-resourced kids and women of Kenya. Side note,
Oh,
but
awesome.
things to give back. That tops me up. That tops my energy up when I can contribute, which of course is the sixth human need. So super important. And I've totally lost your original question, but I got on a roll.
No, it was all about energy and how it's a big piece of
Huge.
your coaching practice. And I mean, it probably stems from athletics and coaching starting at 14, but how like physically engaging what you do through your coaching process with the words and what you're trying to help people understand about making other people better. So I love that aspect of what you shared.
And I have to say, music is a big way
Yeah.
to tap into energy. And this is a great segue to shout out to 3 Second Chances. I know in our pre-show, Michael and I were talking about the band from Boston called 3 Second Chances. And honestly, they have this one song. Maybe we can put it in the show notes. I listen to that, and like before I'm doing a presentation or a workshop, and I play it in my workshops. But a cool story about their band is for people that did music when they were younger, and then maybe life got in the way, they had kids or the job, and now they're helping these people get back into music and give them a second chance and teaching them, some of the finer points of music. So shout out to them. Please check them out on YouTube.
That's awesome.
And I love how music can tap into the energy. And I'm a huge believer as an NLP background in visualization. So all my workshops are getting people to really future pace and imagine themselves stepping into that. And then, of course, connecting what's one action you can take related to stepping into who you want to be. So I think that's something I just wanted to give them a shout out because it taps into energy.
For sure.
Emma, real quick, can you just go into your TED Talk? Because I know Michael mentioned it before, but you've got Unleashing Female Potential. And I have a feeling that it has an energy component as well, listening to the last segment. But can you talk about that for just a second?
Yeah, I talk about one of the opening stories is around when I coached at a women's prison. And it was about how do you unleash this imprisoned female energy? And the purpose of that is to help everybody unleash female potential by unlocking the potential that lives within them. So in the story I tell, it was like I had to listen to them before I could lead them. So I had to follow their lead before they were going to listen to me. And I love that as a leader, as a manager. If I don't understand the people in front of me, if I don't understand the workplace that I'm about to walk into, and I just come in as an expert and say, you need to listen to me because I'm really good at my job, they're not gonna listen. They're not going to strengthen their own inner voice. They're just gonna say, mum told me or dad told me or my coach told me. It's like, what are you really good at? And they're like looking at mum or the coach for the magic answer. So the way that we talk to them becomes the strength of their inner voice. So this is back to that power of next time, the future-based state of empowering them to be able to live the best story of their life possible. And the more we can do that, the more we can support them, I think the more the world will be a better place.
What's interesting to me about that, Emma, is I've volunteered here at a local women's prison, and that experience, it was an all-day experience, really gave me some unique perspective that I had never had. And one of the things that sort of most eye-opening was the ability to give someone hope in a set of circumstances where it can feel hopeless. So unleashing potential or having that sort of conversation with folks who are maybe not feeling their best self is very unique. And if you have the ability to instill hope and help paint a brighter future for them through these conversations is incredibly, incredibly powerful. And you using your story as a TED Talk from that experience to share with the world, I think is a pretty cool way to do that.
Thank you.
And I mean, as we start to come to a close here, one of the questions we like to ask our guests through their journeys and pivots, and for those who are listening and either contemplating something themselves that's scary and different or just starting it, what piece of parting advice would you like to give them?
So to recap one of the through lines, the first one would be to allow yourself to see signs in the universe. And you can only see signs if you actually put it out there. So put out there the things that you want to change. If you're having a conversation with someone, you never know who they know. Literally, I rocked up at the zoo in Denver. I sat next to a woman, 150 people, that she wins United Airlines flights. Like she wins tickets to Australia, right? And I'm sitting next to her. So I'm like, oh, I could tell you a place or two to go. And then she's like, what do you do? I just published my book. I give her a copy of my book. And she goes, oh, will you come into my company and do it with my company? And now I run the National Tooling and Machining Association Emerging Leaders Program because I sat next to that woman. That's a true story.
That's awesome.
So you don't
That's
know,
amazing.
You never know who you're going to sit next to. So you have to be able to be slightly vulnerable to share what it is that you want. And I think, so that's number one. Number two, talent is not nearly as important as execution. You take 1%, one step. Remember that taking action in any direction is better than taking no action at all. And finally, my third comment is, who do you need to become to get to where you want to go? And one of my mentors asked me that when I was younger, and I continuously ask myself that question because every year I believe that we need to form and then transform ourselves. Form and then transform ourselves every year. And how do we do that? We ask ourselves that question. Who do you need to become to get to where you want to go? And then be present, enjoy the journey, because trust me, the destination is continuously shifting and moving. And it's not like Serena Williams once said, when she won one of her 22 Grand Slams, she goes, you don't win the Grand Slam and take the trophy out to dinner with you. It's not like she can take the trophy and go out to dinner with herself, right? So the celebrate the small milestones along the way. That was probably 4 tips. I was trying to keep it to 3, but I think because the goalposts continuously do shift, I think it is important that you acknowledge and celebrate. Boom, small win. Boom. Last week we qualified the most senior leaders of one of the largest tech companies in the United States in Cary, North Carolina. We just qualified 8 of their most senior leaders to become workplace coaches. They told me I'd be doing that even in 2020. That would be very hard to believe. So that's why I have my Ted Lasso quotes. And Michael, your turn, which you get to pick a fortune cookie. I'm going to finish with another quote from somebody much smarter than
Let's
me.
do it.
Which one do you want?
Let's go right in the middle. Yep, that's the
In
one.
the middle. In the middle. That's the one. I
Yeah.
love it. We got Henry Ford said, failure is the only opportunity to begin again more intelligently.
Wow.
Perfect. I mean, that's just
Great way to end.
so apropos for so many things going on. I love it.
I'm jealous. I would like to pick one, Emma, if I could.
John, go for it. Go on.
All right, left side.
Okay. What do we got?
There you go.
All right. Every game is a new beginning. That's what keeps us hungry.
Yes.
Nice.
Unknown.
I love it.
Unknown. I don't
love
know
it.
who said
I
that,
love
but
it. That's
anything
okay.
that I hear that relates to coaching, relates to, both of those quotes relate to the second act
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
perfectly.
They sure
And
do.
we get what we're meant to get. So that's an example. I didn't know which quotes you were going to get, right? Yes, they're all
That's right.
wisdom, but both of those, I think, relate perfectly and really do summarize this episode quite eloquently. So thank you for
Yeah.
choosing those ones, boys.
This has been fantastic.
Yeah. Well, Emma, I despite falling off the edge of the network here and having to come back on, I was extremely blessed by what you brought to the show today, and for the energy that you have given us on the second act. And I know that people are going to want to reach out to you after listening to this. And how do they best do that? And where can they find you?
Yeah, just check out Emma Doyle, EMMADOYLE.com.au, because my mum always tells me to remember to come home for a meal every once in a while.
We will be sure to include that in the show notes for you, and everyone will get to hear it in this episode.
Yep.
Thank you so much for being on the show, for devoting some time to us and our audience. And I know that, man, we're going to run into you somewhere in Colorado.
Oh, yeah.
Eventually, we'll probably do a live show or do something, a follow-on from this episode. But again, thank you so much for dedicating some time today for us and for our audience. And everything's going to be in the show notes for our listeners. Michael, this was an amazing episode. So
Amazing. Thank you so much, Emma. This was fantastic. You definitely brought the energy to the show. I feel more energized from when I started the show, and I loved the conversation. So thank you so much.
yeah,
Thank you as well. And also a big shout out to Todd Lancaster, who connected us from his
Yes.
That's
vintage
right.
chair here in Colorado. And again, I wasn't originally I'm like, I'm not sure why he's connecting us, but I think I'm going to have both of you on my podcast. And I think it's important just to always remember where you come from and be grateful
Absolutely.
for that. So I'm very grateful for Todd and both of you for your time and everything that you do. I know how hard it is to run a podcast. Mine's called the Coaching Podcast. So please check that out as well. And
Yes.
with curiosity and energy and empathy and enjoyment in my heart. Thank you guys. Really appreciate you all.
Yes,
Awesome. Thanks, Emma
Thank
and
you.
John.
Yeah.
It's always a pleasure.
it is, Michael. And I look forward to next time. Until then,
Yeah, absolutely.
we'll see you.
All right. See ya.
The second act with Michael and John stars Michael Newborn and John Ballinger. The podcast is produced by Seltzer Kings. For more information on the show, check out michaelandjohn.com, or if you'd like to get involved in the conversation, give the guys a shout on their socials at The Second Act Movement on most platforms. Thanks for listening.
Seltzer Kings.
Podcasts.